As Indonesia continues the adoption of digital practices and transition towards a more digital economy, many businesses and users are innovating, taking advantage of new ideas and tools such as Web3, digital wallets, NFTs, and more. To discuss more about Indonesia's developments in this digital ecosystem, as well as the potential for growth in blockchain technology, Metro Globe Networks, Audrey Widodo spoke with the CEO of Architect, Tiffany Satyadharma. Let's take a look.
So, we wanted to talk about Web3 with you. It is often described as the next phase of the internet, where decentralized and user ownership are prioritized. Can you explain a little bit to the audience who might not be familiar with Web3, what it is, and why should people, businesses, investors be looking into it?
So basically, the main distinction I think from Web 2 and Web 3 involves a lot of data storage and connectivity and currency and decentralization. Web 2, I think, is about creating content and interacting with websites, while Web 3 is sort of immersing yourself in the digital experience. And it also highly involves concept like individual control of personal data, cryptocurrency, and decentralization of record keeping on the blockchain. I think a very good example of this is Meta as an institution. I don't know if a lot of people know this, but they technically do own our data because it's stored in a centralized system. While if this were to be moved to Web3, actually we own whatever content it is that we display on our social media.
So, as the CEO of Architect, can you tell us a little bit about what you're doing in this Web3 ecosystem?
Right. So Architect was actually built as a Web3 venture builder. So I've had experience in the space for quite some time now. I've worked before in a crypto ledger, an agri-tech company that focused on cryptos, and they have their own ledger as well. And I was actually also a head of growth in an NFT launchpad. So I was able to basically look at all the aspects of it. But I think the key takeaway that I took from all of that, that's why I started Architect, was basically the innovation aspect, because I feel like right now the space is still very new. Innovation was there at the beginning, but I feel like right now it's in a space where everyone's sort of doing the same thing, but they're doing it for in the context of a first world country. If you look at the landscape in general, crypto and NFT users are actually mostly based in bigger cities like Jakarta or Surabaya, not so much for participating economies like majority of Indonesia, where it's still very rural. So I think that's why I sort of started Architect, because I basically have a vision to trickle down that effect and create a circular economy.
Okay, so my next question for you is about the digital wallets. So I know that's a lot what people are talking about when it comes to Web3. So what role do you think does Web3 play in digital wallets? And do you think in Indonesia it would ever be feasible to have?
You probably know that digital wallets in Indonesia also just started adopting probably for the past 5 years, right? It's a concept that is still newly digested by our people. And I feel like in terms of Web3, we have actually our own crypto or Web3 wallet, right? In the future, I feel like it will be merged, but as of right now, it's two completely different things. But what I think will play a huge role in the future is that we can basically not only manage trading or financial assets, but we actually may even control or manage the data on our social networks, for example, such as LinkedIn, Facebook, emails, Gmail, purchases on Amazon, or like photos on Instagram or Snapchat. So it's a more like a super wallet, I guess. And whether I think it's feasible or not in Indonesia, for sure, I think it will be feasible. I think how we make it feasible is sort of the next question. So the solution itself never takes into account of the infrastructure constraints in the rural areas of Indonesia. For example, the internet capacity that reaches our rural areas.
Do you have any insights on the digital rupiah?
So the CBDC led by Project Garuda is actually will be Indonesia's sort of digital currency. I can't say that it's a cryptocurrency, but it is a digital one. So I think what the major effects of Indonesia itself having CBDC is definitely us being able to to almost track every transaction, right? I think another thing is also P2P lending, in a sense where liquidity pools are now able to accept peer-to-peer. And like, I think Binance actually does that. So it sort of aggregates it from someone else, another individual, from one individual to another individual. And banking, I think, is already again starting to tap into it with CBDC, with Project Garuda. So I think it's more so going to be interesting how it will play out once it's released, because I feel like right now everything is very theoretical, right? Of course, like once it comes to market, we will see sort of the hurdles of it and where the chaos is. But I think there's a lot of opportunities in terms of Indonesia itself launching a CBDC, and it also shows, I think, that we're progressing towards a good competitive market. I feel like right now, in Web 2, maybe Indonesia was sort of behind in terms of innovation and technology, but that's not what I've seen in Web 3, surprisingly. I feel like Indonesia is one of the first ones to also contribute to creating a CBDC, which I think is a great outlook to our government.
So would you also be able to share any upcoming projects or developments your company is working on?
So we're currently working on 2 projects under Architect. One of it is an NFT actually based on utility. A lot of projects, right, that we've seen in the previous bull run sounds a bit like a cash grab, right? So that's not what I wanted to make. And I wanted to sort of shift the culture from it being, oh, I'm going to purchase an NFT in hopes of it multiplying a certain amount, so monetary value. I wanted it to take a step back and sort of, okay, what if we detach this? So what we've come up with is sort of a utility-based and O2O experience, basically allowing our customers to understand and take in the full benefits of Web3. And our primary focus and the project was basically made for mass adoption and moving away from the stigma of NFTs as short-term monetary gains. So you can use it, for example, as a loyalty point program or membership. The second one is more towards infrastructure. Like I've said before, solutions right now are not catered to the infrastructure constraints in rural areas of Indonesia. So my company is actually exploring right now a possibility of it.
My last question for you, Tiffany, is what is your future projections for the ecosystem and also just how big the industry might grow in Indonesia?
I think there's a big potential of it. I think 2023, it's about 5% of adoption rate for crypto, around that much, right? And even then, for a country like Indonesia, that's quite a high adoption rate. The potential is massive there, especially when CBDC is launched with Project Garuda. I feel like the potential is still massive and still a blue ocean. There's a lot to discover and there's a lot of mechanism as to how we can utilize it. I'm always a firm believer that because the blockchain system itself is the highly valuable technological advance, that the byproducts of it, such as NFTs and crypto, can actually be utilized to grow that economy. And we, will, as Indonesia, will actually be able to compete at a global level instead of a local one. As you can see right now, like even local artists right in Indonesia, such as Dila Maharani, Arya Mularama, are already competing at a global scale. And where before the opportunities were very limiting, right? Because you had no access to exposure and it was difficult for people to purchase your art if you weren't held by galleries or such, as an independent, for example, just because of that exposure. But because that border to border control is sort of limited in this economy, it allows much more opportunities for Indonesian companies, especially to grow, to become